People are exercising more, eating better, but they don't see the scale moving. That's very, very frustrating. It's almost like I equate it to you going to work, and when it comes Friday, you don't get paid because people are looking for some sort of return on investment for eating better and moving more. And when that doesn't happen, then that kind of impacts the motivation, and sometimes people blame it on willpower. But the truth is, the effort was high, the result was low. It's not a motivation problem, it's a metabolic problem. At midlife, our hormones have changed, our stress load has changed, our bodies have changed, and the old plan just doesn't work anymore.
Welcome back to Midlife Unleashed. If you're doing everything right, eating better, exercising more, and the scale hasn't moved in months, this episode is for you. Because here's the truth no one clearly explains. Weight loss in midlife is no longer about calories. It's about blood sugar and stress. So today we're unpacking why weight won't budge and what your body is actually responding to. So are you ready to get into this today, Doug? It's nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. Let's have some fun.
Always. So let's hop into it because I feel, especially in midlife, we might be doing the right things and watching our calories and working out and doing all these things, but the scale doesn't change. So what's the most common situation you actually see with midlife clients?
Yeah, well, I often hear, kind of what you said, I'm eating better, right? And people are exercising more, but they don't see the scale moving. And that's very, very frustrating. It's almost like I equate it to you going to work, and then when it comes Friday, you don't get paid, right? Because people are looking for some sort of return on investment for eating better and moving more. And when that doesn't happen, then that kind of impacts the motivation, and sometimes people blame it on willpower. But, the truth is, the effort was high, the result was low. So that tells me it's not a motivation problem. It's most likely a metabolic problem, and the reality is at midlife, our hormones have changed, our stress load has changed, our bodies have changed, and the old plan just doesn't work anymore.
Absolutely. And I could only imagine how frustrating that is in midlife because even when you're not in midlife and you're doing these things and the scale doesn't move, it's so frustrating. It's like, what's going on? So I could only imagine the harder it gets, the more frustrating it can be.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that makes it even more frustrating at midlife is people have done some of these things when they were younger and they had success. So they think they should be automatically able to have success now. And it just doesn't work that way. Things have changed. The game has changed.
Absolutely. And why does blood sugar matter so much in midlife?
Because blood sugar controls your insulin, and insulin controls fat storage. So when your blood sugar spikes repeatedly, even if you're eating healthy things, that keeps your insulin levels kind of elevated. And when insulin is high, fat loss is basically locked. It's not going to go anywhere. It's very difficult. And the other thing that changes at midlife is sarcopenia. We've talked about this before, right? That's that natural decline of muscle mass. And muscle is your primary glucose disposal system. So the less muscle you have, the less ability you have to control your blood sugar. So some foods that never bothered you in the 30s, like your little smoothie and your little oatmeal with cinnamon and banana, or your little healthy snack bar, those things will spike your blood sugar now, and whenever your insulin is high, it's just fat loss just becomes very, very difficult. And a lot of people just don't know much about it. And so it doesn't matter how hard they work. If that blood sugar is high, you're going to have a rough way with it.
Exactly. A lot of people don't know that. It's always been, we always hear the same thing. work out more, eat less, you'll lose weight. And then throughout aging, it's really not the case. So it's good that, you're explaining all of this and really breaking it down. And
Mhm.
another thing that goes into weight gain that affects weight gain, I should say, is stress. So how does stress really get involved in weight gain?
Well, it really doesn't just affect your mind, which everyone thinks, I'm stressed, but it definitely affects your blood sugar also. And cortisol raises your blood sugar as well because, our bodies are very dynamic. And when we're stressed, we're sending a message to our body. And one of those messages is we need fuel. And because we're ready for a fight or flight, you know, and so in order to be prepared for that, our body spikes our blood sugar so that we've got more energy to address whatever that danger is that's happening, but your body doesn't know the difference from physical stress, emotional stress, or even nutritional stress, right? It reacts the same way, whether it's work stress, relationship stress, overtraining, undereating, and all of it, no matter what, makes your cortisol level rise. And that raises your blood sugar, and all that pushes for fat storage. So your body doesn't care what kind of stress is coming. It's got a dynamic system to actually handle. It's an incredible system, our stress system, to handle stress. Our problem today is when the stress becomes chronic. That's a huge problem because the stress system isn't made to be on all the time. It's made to come on, address the danger, and then recover. And what we're doing is we're just keeping it on, stressing, 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 and that will 100% just lock up any ability to lose any weight or fat, really stored fat.
Mhm. And we talked a little bit about dieting and how that changes and how that should change in midlife, but how does dieting actually backfire more in midlife?
Well, it usually backfires because most people are doing it wrong. Right. And so now dieting becomes a stress because, caloric restriction, right? When you're not eating enough calories, right, that raises your cortisol levels. It also accelerates muscle loss, which is, a huge problem. But it also crashes your blood sugar, which kind of drives cravings, So the brutal truth of it is, at midlife, your body adapts to that much faster now, too. So you got to be really careful with these the chronic dieting has to end. And that real low caloric restriction, it just causes another problem. It just raises your cortisol level. So when you eat less, your metabolism slows, your hunger hormones increase, and fat storage, fat kind of comes protective, right? Your body's less willing to give up the fat. It wants to hold on it. So I often hear people say, I'm barely eating and I don't know why I'm not losing any weight. And it's like, I'm telling them at midlife, eating less doesn't make you lean. It kind of makes you guarded, so you can eat less and lose weight, but it really does have to be strategic. You can't have these huge caloric deficits that people do when they diet and eat these unbalanced meals. That just makes it very difficult. And at midlife, like I said, everything's changed. So the game is much more strategic. It's much more harder to play. It's winnable, but you just got to be much more guarded about it. And oftentimes when people go about dieting, they just don't go about doing it right. And that just causes more stress.
Absolutely. And I think since so many things do change in midlife, people can probably feel very stuck. Like you said, we're doing what we've done before that would work, and now it's
Mhm.
working. So, what are some of the key things that you think keep people feeling stuck?
Primarily, it's like the three forces, right? That if you could imagine a triangle, making up the triangle, you got blood sugar instability, right? So your blood sugar is going too high, your blood sugar is going too low. It's not consistent, which doesn't create a weight loss environment. We've got the chronic stress going on that we just talked about, right? So you got elevated cortisol levels, you've got elevated blood sugar, and then it's just inadequate recovery, right? That's like the triangle. Those three things will keep you stuck. And the reality is you can't out train it, you can't out diet it, and you definitely can't out hustle it. The only way to manage that is you have to regulate it. That's the only answer. And everyone's trying to do these other things, but you got to address those. Blood sugar and chronic stress, um, they make it very difficult for weight loss. Very, very difficult.
Speaking about blood sugar, how does sleep tie into blood sugar and weight?
Good question. We don't talk enough about sleep and stress, and both of them, are in my perfect scale because I know how imperative they are to actually losing weight and keeping it off. But poor sleep creates insulin resistance, and the less deep sleep you get, the higher your cortisol levels will be. Also, your appetite hormones will be off the rail. So, your hunger hormones are all jacked up and your cortisol levels are up and your stress levels, and you're becoming more insulin resistant. It's very, very, very difficult to lose weight. Right. And so sleep plays such a huge part in it. And so, they've done studies that show that one night of poor sleep will increase your hunger the next day. It's going to increase your cravings for sugar. It's going to reduce your insulin sensitivity. All of that just off of a poor night's sleep. So that's why I always say sleep's not just recovery. It's part of your metabolic regulation. Right. So if you're going to, regulate your metabolism, sleep needs to be part of that. Not just the food, not just the exercise, but stress management, sleep. All of those play a key part. But you don't really fix weight when you have a sleeping problem. It doesn't work that way, which is why we always monitor sleep as part of my perfect scale program.
That it makes so much sense. I actually have another podcast that we talk about sleep hygiene and how important it is for recovery and for getting into, your REM sleep and how it can help with like insulin resistance. And it's just so important. And it's something that I think so many people don't take into consideration. Everyone knows they need to sleep well, but it's not really a thought process of how important it really is. And
It
so,
really is.
Mhm.
Well, you said the key word, sleep hygiene.
Mhm.
Right? That hygiene is a big word. And if people look up the definition of hygiene, that'll tell you how comprehensive and how important that sleep actually, can be. And I know when I wrote my book and was doing all the research on sleep, man, that changed everything about how I approached it because I would always go to bed late and I would get up early. And I was one of those people that told myself, I don't need 8 hours of sleep. I can function good on 6 hours of sleep. And then as soon as I started sleeping properly, all of a sudden I noticed some of those cravings were gone. And I noticed my head was a little clearer. And I noticed I dropped a few pounds, So sleep plays a huge part from insulin resistance to cortisol to managing your leptin and ghrelin levels. It's a game changer. It's a game changer. It deserves a seat at the table.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know if I don't sleep well, my brain fog the next day and I'm waking up, I'm craving a nice coffee with cream and, you
There you
know,
go.
bacon, egg, and
Sugar fat.
cheese, all those
Sugar
things.
and fat.
Exactly. Exactly. So we talked about all these things that don't work, right? That
Yeah.
change, but what actually works? Like, what is the right thing to do?
Mm. Well, uh, fat loss happens when you focus on regulation, not restriction. All right. So the things that work, number one, strength training, right? That's going to improve your glucose disposal and how your body handles sugar. So you got to have strength training. You got to have muscle in there. Protein in every meal because that will help to balance your blood sugar, which is very, very important. So you don't get those spikes and you don't get those drops. Walking's important for lowering your stress and your cortisol. And if you do it after a meal, that will help balance your blood sugar out sooner. So walking plays a part too. Fewer intense workouts, right? Because that helps with recovery, right? You can't just keep beating your body down without the recovery. So you don't need to do it every single day like the Orange Theory or the F45, some of those type workouts. A couple of them are good. Every day is not good. And so you want fewer of those type intense workouts. And then you want consistent meal timing. People don't really understand the value of consistent meal timing, but that helps to make your blood sugar more predictable. And that helps you to get consistent nutrients at the right time. And if you do it the right way, then your energy's nice and stable. Those things work. It's a pretty simple framework. You gotta stabilize, you gotta strengthen, you gotta recover, and then you just repeat. And if you keep doing those things, you stabilize those hormones, right? You strengthen your body, right? You give yourself adequate recovery, and then you do it again and again and again. And what happens is weight loss just becomes the side effect.
Hmm. Sounds like a lot of routine and repetition is
Hmm. Of
what
the right things. Of the right things.
of the right thing. Exactly. Of everything you're saying, getting the good sleep and protein and the right kind of workouts and not overextending yourself, but doing the right, figuring out what works and then repeating it.
Sure, sure. And like I said, the challenge for us at midlife is what we know and what we think works was what we learned 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it doesn't work anymore. That's the challenge.
Yep. And what are signs that blood sugar is the problem? Because there can be so many different things that can be causing it, but what's a clear sign or indicator that blood sugar
And
is actually the problem?
your body always tells the truth if you listen to it. So there are definitely some signs. That midday energy crash, that's definitely a sign that you've got some blood sugar problems going on because you're supposed to have stable energy throughout the day, right? If you got those late afternoon or evening cravings, you see people, those are the people headed to the candy machine or headed to the break room or reaching in the drawer, grabbing the little chocolates. That's another sign that your blood sugar is not very stable. If you got that stubborn belly fat that just won't move, it just won't budge, that's definitely a sign of blood sugar issues or some insulin resistance. If you're waking up at night, not just a random wake up at night, but frequent urination or waking up thirsty, you got some blood sugar issues. All right. And then there's people don't sometimes when they're dieting, they don't realize that they have blood sugar problems. But if you feel worse when you're dieting, like you're irritable, you're extremely fatigued, that's because of blood sugar. Maybe it's because you took your calories too low, or maybe it's because your blood sugars used to being so high that now when it's normal, you feel kind of fatigued. But you shouldn't feel worse when you're dieting unless you're doing that crazy kind of dieting type stuff. But all of those are feedback signs. And, we always should be, particularly at midlife, because we can kick the can when we're young, but we always should be listening to our bodies. They are constantly sending us messages, and we should kind of pursue those messages as best we can because that'll help us to get nice and that'll help us to regulate and kind of stabilize ourselves so that we can be productive.
Absolutely. And how do you think that people should really think about progress now?
Mm, good question. First I would say stop chasing weight loss first, right? Everyone goes into this looking at the scale. Stop doing that, right? Work on the habits, right? Or the key things that will allow you to lose weight, which is balanced meals, nutrition, right? Strength training, exercise. You got your hydration, drinking plenty of water so that your body can function properly. You got your sleep and you got your stress, and then you got your planning. Those things right there are going to help you to actually get the results that you're looking for. Now, what are some of the signs of progress? Number one, you got stable energy, right? You're not dealing with those highs and those lows and all those things. Number two, you got predictable hunger. It's not just coming out of anywhere. You're being very stable with your blood sugar, so your hunger is kind of predictable. Those two alone will lead to better sleep, so that you're sleeping good, you're getting quality sleep, so that you got your hormones kind of in check and everything's going well from the hunger standpoint. And if that is the case, then you're going to see increased strength. So because you're working out, you should see positive increases in the movements and in the exercises that you're doing. So those are signs of progress that I look for in clients, and I can kind of see it, or I talk with clients about how they're going, how they're feeling, how they're sleeping, all those sort of things before we go to try to get on the scale and see what's going on. Those are all non-scale victories, but weight loss follows regulation. All right. It's not the other way around. So when your body feels safe, then it'll actually use that stored fat for energy. So your goal should be to just try to make it feel safe and try to regulate.
Absolutely. In midlife, weight loss isn't about trying harder, it's about working smarter. So when you calm the stress response and stabilize blood sugar, fat loss really becomes a side effect, not a battle. So if this episode gave you clarity, share it with someone who's blaming themselves for a biology problem. This is
Hmm.
Midlife Unleashed, where we replace outdated rules with strategies that actually work. Thank you again, Doug. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, and we'll see
As
you next
well. Thank you.